Yasmin walked the quiet streets of her new town like a ghost trying not to be noticed, her eyes flicking at familiar shapes in unfamiliar surroundings. The small bakery she passed every morning felt safe, ordinary, yet even the sweet smell of freshly baked bread couldn't erase the tight coil of tension in her chest. She worked her little job at the library, cataloging books with meticulous care, as if organizing stories could somehow keep her own tangled past neatly in place. Her neighbors nodded politely, strangers who knew nothing of the woman behind the gentle smile. At night, though, the silence in her tiny apartment became unbearable, filled with the whispers of mistakes that had chased her across state lines. Every letter unopened on her table, every shadow that lingered too long, reminded her that the past never truly lets go. Some nights, Yasmin sat by the window, tracing the raindrops sliding down the glass, her mind replaying faces and voices she hoped never to hear again. The letters started arriving weeks ago, no return address, no signature, but each one carried that familiar, unsettling weight, a quiet reminder that someone remembered. Her pulse quickened whenever the doorbell rang, even if it was just a delivery, and she'd freeze, caught between the instinct to hide and the realization that her life depended on moving forward. Memories of Texas clawed at her consciousness, sharp and vivid, like a storm breaking through calm skies. She remembered driving down long, empty highways, the radio off, the headlights slicing through the night, heart racing with every siren wail in the distance. Even the mundane routines of her day, pouring coffee, shelving books, brushing her hair, carried a shadow, an echo of the life she had left behind, but could never truly escape. Then, there were the strangers who asked questions that didn't quite add up, their eyes lingering a little too long, their words brushing past the edges of recognition. Yasmin felt the old panic stir inside her, that gnawing fear that someone, somewhere, knew exactly who she was. She caught herself double-checking locks, scanning the streets for faces she didn't recognize, every small sound amplified into a potential threat. Yet, amid the tension, there were fleeting moments of quiet beauty, morning light spilling across her kitchen counter, the soft hum of the town waking up. That reminded her why she'd chosen this hidden life. Each day was a careful balance between vigilance and trying to feel normal, a dance with shadows she couldn't escape. And just when she thought the past was safely buried, a new knock, a mysterious glance, or an unsigned note whispered that someone from her old life might be closing in, pulling her story into motion again. Yasmin tried to convince herself that she was safe, that the quiet town had swallowed her whole. But the moment she saw familiar shapes in unfamiliar faces, the walls of her new life started to tremble. A man at the cafe had a laugh that sparked something long buried, a memory of a summer in Texas, of sunlight falling on the wrong side of a secret. Her pulse raced as she ducked into the bookstore aisle, pretending to examine a stack of novels while her mind raced with fragments of the past she thought she'd left behind. Even small, innocent comments from neighbors felt loaded with hidden meanings, and she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always watching, waiting to uncover her. Deep down, she knew she couldn't live like this forever, constantly alert, constantly hiding, but the thought of returning to the life she ran from made her chest tighten. And yet, a flicker of hope emerged when she met someone whose presence felt warm, safe, someone she could almost trust. It started with subtle hints, questions about her past that seemed casual but carried an edge, whispers of events only someone close to her old life would know. Yasmin's stomach churned each time a conversation veered too close to memories she'd buried, forcing her to smile and nod while her mind raced for safe answers. She caught wind that someone might be investigating her, a journalist asking the wrong questions, an ex-partner probing old connections, and the old fear surged like a tidal wave she hadn't felt in years. Her confidant, a quiet friend she met through the library, noticed the strain and offered a listening ear, a rare pocket of trust in a world where betrayal lurked in the shadows. Yasmin felt torn between relief and guilt. Confiding even a little could bring comfort, but also risk exposing everything she'd fought to hide. The tension inside her grew, a delicate balancing act between survival and the human need for connection. Late nights became a battleground between fear and longing. As Yasmin replayed every encounter, every glance that might hint someone was onto her, she remembered the open fields of Texas, the desperate drives under moonlight, the adrenaline that had once kept her alive, and wondered if that same vigilance would ever truly leave her. Even the smallest slip, a misplaced word, a lingering stare, felt like a door creaking open to the past she could no longer control. Her friend's quiet support was a fragile lifeline, reminding her that not everyone sought to uncover her secrets, yet it also underscored the danger of being too close to anyone. The town, which once seemed like sanctuary, now felt like a maze lined with invisible eyes, each corner hiding questions that threatened to unravel her carefully built life. And as she stared at the dim glow of her kitchen light, Yasmin knew deep down that her past wasn't just creeping in, it was knocking, demanding to be confronted. The warning came suddenly. A message slipped under her door with no name, no explanation, just a few words that made her blood run cold. "We know who you are." Yasmin's heart thumped like a drum in her chest, each beat echoing the old terror she thought she had buried deep. She started retracing every step she'd taken in the last week, scanning the streets for anyone who didn't belong, anyone whose curiosity lingered too long. Memories of fleeing Texas surged uninvited, the screech of tires on asphalt, the blur of neon lights, the raw panic that had shaped her very survival instinct. Every familiar routine now felt fragile, every shadow a potential threat, as if the quiet town had become a trap rather than a refuge. In that moment, she realized the past she'd tried to outrun was no longer distant. It had found her, and it wouldn't let go quietly. Yasmin began taking extreme precautions, moving small belongings from her apartment, checking locks 3 times, even avoiding streets she used to walk without a second thought. Every glance over her shoulder, every unexpected knock at the door, sent adrenaline racing through her veins, reviving memories of running from men in Texas who never stopped hunting her. Flashbacks surfaced unbidden, dark highways, the hum of the engine as she drove through the night, the constant fear of sirens closing in, of footsteps behind her in the dimly lit corridors of motels. She remembered the faces she had lost along the way, friends who had vanished or betrayed her, each memory a sting, each loss a reminder of why hiding had become survival. The world that once felt ordinary now seemed like a web of threats, each encounter a potential unraveling of her carefully constructed identity. And as night fell, Yasmin realized that this chase wasn't just about safety. It was about confronting the inevitability of her past catching up. Yasmin's nights were now haunted by whispers of her former life, each sound in the darkness magnified, each passing car a possible pursuer. She replayed every decision she had made in Texas, questioning what could have been done differently, what mistakes had led her here. The shadows in her apartment seemed alive, stretching and twisting like the consequences she could no longer escape. Even the small comforts, a cup of tea, the soft glow of a lamp, felt fragile, as if any normalcy could shatter the moment someone recognized her. Her mind flickered between fear and resolve, knowing she might have to vanish again, move faster, think sharper, just to survive another day. And as dawn approached, the faint sound of a knock or a car door closing reminded her that the chase wasn't a memory. It was here, relentless, and it would not wait for her to be ready. The knock came at an impossible hour, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the quiet of Yasmin's apartment like a blade. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she hesitated, fingers frozen over the lock, the weight of every choice she had made pressing down on her chest. She knew, before even opening the door, that it was someone from her past, someone who could unravel the fragile life she had tried to build. Memories surged, arguments, promises broken, roads driven in desperation, tears shed in secret, all converging into a single terrifying moment of reckoning. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, the kind of silence that screamed louder than any words. And in that pause, Yasmin understood that hiding had reached its limit, that the person outside held more than questions. They held the power to expose everything. The door opened, and the presence on the other side carried a mix of authority and quiet menace, a reminder of the life Yasmin thought she'd left behind. Words were exchanged, careful and measured, yet every syllable carried the weight of judgment, accusation, and unspoken history. Yasmin's chest tightened as she realized that negotiation might be possible, but it came with risks she hadn't dared to imagine. Trusting even a little could cost her everything. Flashbacks flared, desperate drives through rain-slicked streets, moments of betrayal by those she once called friends, the constant tension of being hunted, and the unbearable loneliness of fleeing. Each memory sharpened her resolve, but also reminded her that guilt was a shadow she could never outrun, no matter how far she moved. The confrontation was not just external, it was a mirror, forcing her to face the woman she had become and the choices she had made to survive. Yasmin stood in the dim light of her apartment, every instinct screaming to flee. Yet a strange, reluctant courage rooted her to the spot. The person across from her didn't just carry authority, they carried the weight of her past, the consequences she had long avoided, the truth she could no longer deny. Her mind raced through every possible choice. Continue hiding, attempt to reason, or surrender and face what she had been running from all these years. Guilt, regret, and the desire for redemption mingled into a knot in her chest, each emotion demanding acknowledgement. Tiny gestures, a hand trembling, a sigh escaping, eyes meeting eyes, spoke louder than words, revealing a humanity even in confrontation. And as the room filled with tension thick enough to touch, Yasmin realized that this was the turning point. Her past was no longer just a shadow behind her. It had arrived, insisting she confront it head-on. The first light of morning spilled across Yasmin's apartment, soft and forgiving, as if the world itself was holding its breath after the storm of the previous night. She sat with a quiet cup of coffee, letting the warmth seep into her hands, trying to steady the racing thoughts that had refused to sleep. Everything had changed. The confrontation had forced choices, exposed truths, and left scars both visible and hidden. Yet somehow there was clarity in the chaos. She thought of the life she had built here, fragile but real, the small moments that had once seemed ordinary now shining with significance. The presence of her confidant, patient and unwavering, reminded her that connection had survived, even in the shadow of fear. And deep down, Yasmin understood that while the past could never be erased, it could finally coexist with the life she had fought so hard to hold on to. Yasmin reflected on the choices she had made, the risks she had taken, and the moments of courage that had carried her through the darkest nights. There was a bittersweet ache in her chest, a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that some bridges could never be rebuilt, yet others had held firm despite everything. She noticed small details around her apartment, the sunlight glinting on the edge of a book, the faint scent of flowers from the windowsill, reminders that life, in its quiet persistence, continued on. Her thoughts drifted to those she had lost, to mistakes she couldn't undo, and to the fleeting chances for forgiveness she had finally allowed herself to imagine. Even in the uncertainty of what lay ahead, there was a fragile, radiant hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could finally breathe without constantly looking over her shoulder. The storm had passed, but its lessons lingered, shaping her steps with a newfound wisdom she hadn't realized she possessed. Yasmin stepped outside into the crisp morning air, feeling the weight of the past settle into something manageable, no longer a chain, but a quiet reminder of what she had endured. The streets of her town seemed alive in a new way, neighbors chatting, children playing, the scent of fresh bread drifting from the bakery, a world that felt both ordinary and miraculous after so much fear. She knew that her journey wasn't over, that challenges would come, and that the future remained uncertain. But for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of peace. Each step forward was an act of defiance against the shadows that had once controlled her, a declaration that she could face life fully, even with the scars she carried. Her confidant's presence, steady and reassuring, offered a quiet affirmation. She wasn't alone in navigating this new chapter, and as Yasmin walked through the sunlit streets, she embraced the fragile balance of hope and reality, ready to live, not just survive, in the world she had fought to reclaim.